Coming up on CTV News tonight, Canterbury teachers could face job cuts, and Alzheimer's Canterbury looks at new ways to raise money and awareness. Welcome to CTV News, I'm Emily Cooper. Some Christchurch teachers could face job cuts as funding dwindles for Christchurch schools that have seen a significant drop in student numbers. It's thought hundreds of Christchurch teachers could lose their jobs if school roles continue to fall. Ministry of Education figures showed that nearly 5,000 pupils had moved to new schools. PPTA President Robin Duff has called on the Minister of Education Anne Tolley to provide job security for secondary school teachers in Canterbury. Mr Duff is calling on the government to continue funding schools into the next year at pre-earthquake levels, but this has been ruled out by the Education Minister. He says schools losing pupils will be doubly hit with lower funding and potential job losses if guaranteeing minimum formula staffing is not frozen at the level it was before the earthquakes.
I've written to the Minister asking whether she would consider, among the other efforts made by the Ministry for schools that are having a pretty challenging time in Christchurch, whether she would consider holding the staffing levels for all the schools in the Canterbury area for the next year, that's the 2012 year.
He says with people leaving Christchurch due to the quakes and school losing pupils, this could lead to loss of funding, and this will almost certainly lead to job losses. Mr Duff believes Canterbury teachers should be supported, as teachers were not only affected personally by the quakes, but were going the extra mile to support their students by running extra lessons and tutorials for students. He says the difficulty for anyone dealing with the after effects of the quake is uncertainty.
The usual process is with the loss of students is that not only does funding become slightly reduced in terms of the operation of the school, but also, of course, students mean that a significant number bring a drop in staffing as well. Sometimes just teaching, but more often it can involve a little bit more than that. If there is a reduction in the numbers, and the Minister continues on with the usual process of assessing the numbers of students and the staff that would be guaranteed by that, then it's almost certain. Some schools have lost a number, others are holding, but overall the situation is quite fluid.
It's thought this could lead to a shortage of teachers for Christchurch in the future. Alzheimer's Canterbury has been forced to cancel its annual appeal with no CBD to fundraise in. But now the organisation has found other ways to raise money and awareness for the disease. Alzheimer's Canterbury has had to cancel its annual appeal, which aims to raise not only money, but awareness for the disease. Volunteer coordinator Heather Reeves says after the CBD was closed down, it was apparent the fundraising could not go ahead.
Well, normally we would have our annual street appeal in May, but because of the earthquake in February, we had to cancel it this year, and it became very apparent pretty quickly that that was what was going to happen because the streets were so broken. A lot of the buildings that would normally collect outside of were just no longer there. The red zone was in force, so we couldn't have our volunteers walk around collecting, and we just couldn't ask any more of the Christchurch people to give us any money. It just seemed really hard, and it just wasn't going to be effective. And also we just wanted to look after our own volunteers as well and the staff to make sure that they weren't out and about in unsafe situations.
However, the organisation has found new ways to raise money and awareness.
So we had to find other ways, we had to think outside of the box, and the annual street appeal wasn't just about money for us. A lot of it is about raising the profile of dementia and helping to break down the stigma of dementia and get people talking about Alzheimer's and other forms of dementia. So we wanted to find some fundraising opportunity that did raise some funds, but at the same time help the community talk about dementia a bit more. So we came up with a Trade Me auction.
And she says it's been hugely successful, with artists, authors, jewellery designers and members of the public donating pieces for the auction, everything from ballet tickets to barbecues. Trade Me has also given Alzheimer's Canterbury $5,000 in free advertising on their website for the auctions, and it's hoped this should generate around 2 million views.
It's going amazingly, yeah. We didn't really know what to expect. We asked for donations from artists and authors and all sorts of members of the community, business people from all around the country, and it felt like Christmas. During all the aftershocks over the last couple of months, When everyone was quite stressed, it was like a wee ray of light when we'd get the post in and we'd open up these parcels and there'd be all these amazing donations. So we knew that we had some great items up for auction, but we didn't know what to expect when we actually put them up for auction. And within 12 hours, we had most of the items meeting their reserve. So we're very excited. It's fantastic.
If you want to bid on any of the auctions, you have until the 12th of July.
It closes the 12th of July and they can do a search on Alzheimer's Canterbury and all our items will be listed there. You can see them, but they've got to be in quick.
The organisation has been in Canterbury for almost 30 years and was the first in the country.
Well, we've been here since the early 80s and we work with people with dementia in the community and their carers and their families. So that's a lot of the community that we work with, and we offer social worker support, we offer group support, volunteers and education for people in the community, and we want people with dementia to stay in their homes for longer, and we want their carers to be able to be valuable members of our communities. We want them to go about their normal lives as much as possible.
And Heather says it's become harder for those living with dementia since the quakes.
It's a lot tougher, and dementia is not something people like to talk about very often, and they might not know that their neighbour has dementia. They might not know that their friend has dementia. So we want to get the word out, we want people talking about it more to break down that stigma. With February, what happened is that it has just become so hard and our workload has increased hugely, and what our social workers are seeing out in the community is devastating. It's just devastating, trying to explain to some people with dementia how to use a portaloo, what's happened with their houses, what's happened with their properties, compounded by the ongoing stress for the carers and their families moving in together. It's just truly, truly devastating. So our workload has increased hugely and our volunteers' workload has increased hugely. So that's why some good news like the trading auction, it's just lovely for us to be involved.
All the money raised will stay in Canterbury for the Canterbury Alzheimer's community. Coming up after the break, serious flooding on earthquake-damaged roads in New Brighton. Welcome back. There's been serious flooding today in parts of New Brighton, closing parts of New Brighton Road. The earthquake-damaged road has had about half a metre of flooding, which was caused by high tide. The road was already undergoing earthquake repairs. Roads were expected to reopen as the tide dropped. Here's Warren Head now from Headliners magazine with your weekly business update.
Well, the big news started with a bang, and that was the takeover offer for Charlie's Fruit Juice Company. Charlie's was founded by Stefan Laponica and Mark Ellis, the rugby star and entertainer, a few years back, and for quite a while it was hard haul, and they got some people to put in some private equity money and they supported them all the way through, and they were certainly required when things were pretty quiet back in around about 2008 when the global financial crisis was really at its worst. This week they got a takeover offer from Asahi through the Schweppes organisation in Australia, and they were offered a price that was quite irresistible, 44 cents a share, and the previous price was 28 cents last Friday. So the independent directors will meet and decide what recommendation they'll give to the shareholders, but the owners have already accepted the deal in what's called a lock-up arrangement. So Mr. Ellis and Mr. Laponica should probably score about $18 million each for their hard work over the last few years, and the company will become part of the Schweppes organisation in Australia. And we've got a good story about Air New Zealand on our front cover this week, and one of the analysts that we cover, particularly this instant from Forsyth Bar, is inclined to like the stock. We don't have a view on it ourselves, but the analysts do, and our headline says new boarding call. The upshot of that is, what about fuel price, and what about the ash situation? So the ash is a bit of an issue, and Air New Zealand, of course, has overcome this by flying at lower altitude. I was on a flight last week where the pilot got up, came back into the main cabin and made an announcement and said what he was going to do. He explained where the ash was, and he didn't ask for questions. I think we were all a bit surprised that he was standing in front of us, and off they took in the direction of Wellington. But I guess the big cost is the cost of fuel, and if you fly at lower altitude, it's a cash problem more than an ash problem. So I guess Air New Zealand probably has been a bit more pragmatic in that regard. It's new aircraft, new fuel-efficient aircraft. You know, the Dreamliner is still several years away. It'll be fabulous when that turns up, and I hope the costs of the airfares come down accordingly. But in the meantime, the interesting thing is there that as fuel price peaks, several months later, according to the analysts, the price of the stock changes as well. There seems to be a lag of 2 to 4 months, peaks and troughs with the oil price or the fuel price and the price of the share price.
Staying with business news, the National Infrastructure Plan shows the government will invest over $17 billion in infrastructure in the next 4 years, which will support many jobs. The government will invest $7.6 billion on social assets such as schools, hospitals, state houses and prisons over the next 4 years, $6.5 billion on roads and about $1.5 billion each on broadband and rail. In addition, there's an extra $5.5 billion to rebuild Canterbury and state-owned enterprises. Minister of Finance Bill English says New Zealand faces some major challenges, including rebuilding Canterbury. The government's 20-year infrastructure strategy outlines the government's priorities over the next 3 years, which are working with stakeholders to rebuild Canterbury infrastructure, providing a comprehensive approach to investment in Auckland that's fair to all New Zealanders, improving the management of government-owned social infrastructure assets such as prisons, hospitals and schools, and focusing on transport investment. The next National Infrastructure Plan will be produced in 3 years' time, and the latest plan can be viewed online at www.infrastructure.govt.nz/plan/2011. Coming up after the break, your local weather. Welcome back. Kineta Knight spoke to City Councillor Aaron Kewen on City Life to get the latest updates from the City Plan.
The annual plan was adopted last week.
Yes.
You voted against it.
Yeah, I was the only one, strangely, which surprises me because a few have complained about the budgets and how much is spent and rates going up, but they voted for it. So that was a little odd. I think when I was running for council, I said that I wouldn't put rates up beyond the rate of inflation, so that's what I voted for. I was a little surprised that others didn't do the same. And then you see other things happening in the media this week which were contrary to what happened in the meeting, so I find that very odd.
What was the reaction when you voted against it?
Oh, the steely look from around the table of, why have you voted against the annual plan? We need to be together on this. But I think it's healthy to wear your heart on your sleeve and vote for what you believe in. And I thought we could have carved a lot of savings. I think the public would have wanted some savings this year, and certainly the other councillors thought that now wasn't the time to cut back on anything. I thought it was the perfect time. So.
Now, I know that you live in Shirley, in the Shirley area. How are things over there for you at the moment?
Well, my end of the street's fine, but the other end is not. So that's how it changes, just that quickly, that you can go, 400 metres down the road and there's just liquefaction and road humps everywhere and broken sewer lines. So that's how much our city changes as you go through different neighbourhoods.
Are you getting out there into the neighbourhood and talking to people?
Yeah. Right from as soon as the quakes happen, whenever we get major aftershocks, I head straight out, because that way, like on the 13th, was able to report straight back to council. Actually, the phone lines were down in town. The EOC wasn't operational because the big tower up behind the art gallery, that's looking like that's going to be pulled down, but that moved so much on the day they had to evacuate the EOC and set up a separate one. So all the information that was coming back from the suburbs, I was bringing back on paper. I was just out writing it all down, all the roads that had liquefied really badly.
Okay.
So they got that information back on paper that day.
Wow. So how do you think the recovery is going in Christchurch?
Compared to how it goes in the rest of the world, really, really well. For those people that aren't enjoying it, really badly, because the only things they know is what they see around them, so they just see a broken city. So for them, the recovery is going really bad. So that's understandable because that's the environment they're in. But for myself, that gets to see what the future will look like, to hear from people overseas and to see what the government's doing for us, it's going really well. And so that's hard because I know, but they don't get to see it. And people can say there's a lack of communication, but I don't think there is. There seems to be a bombardment of communication. It's how you decipher it.
Okay, now finally there's been an announcement of a professor from Harvard University coming to Christchurch. Tell me about that.
Yes. Well, this is actually the first place for it to be announced, Kaneda, other than a few councillors know, and the Mayor, is Douglas Ehlers, who is a disaster recovery professor at Harvard University, who come and met us in San Francisco, is coming out to Christchurch in August. So in the first half of August, he'll be here for 2 days. So we're going to do 2 sessions. The first one will be with council staff, elected members, interested parties and business groups. Will come on the first day, and he'll tell people, he'll explain how disasters go worldwide and what your recovery responses should be and where you should be at. And so that'll give us a gauge of where we're at.
Pete Smith hit the streets today in Street Talk to ask, how often do you use your chequebook and would you manage without it?
News is coming through that New Zealand's going to join the global trend to wipe out chequebooks. Now, I use one, and I'm sure a lot of New Zealanders still use a chequebook. If you don't, what do you have to use? That's the street question today. How will you get on when the chequebook disappears? How would you get on without a chequebook?
Probably most of my stuff's done internet banking, but
Right.
from the perspective of businesses, a lot of people don't do internet banking from a business perspective. So yeah, doing away with chequebooks will be a problem. Yeah.
So how do you think you'll get round that?
Well, I don't know actually. It would take a lot of adjustment by certain businesses that you deal with.
Yeah.
Because a lot of commercial businesses don't have EFTPOS and this, that, and the other if you're purchasing goods.
I suppose to be fair though, you wouldn't use a chequebook as much now as you used to.
Oh, nowhere near as much. But I probably, if I have 10 to 15 bills to pay, I'd probably pay 3 or 4 of those by cheque, generally.
Right.
Yeah, as a guideline, yeah.
I don't pay the bills.
You don't pay the bills? You're lucky. Hey, who pays those for you?
I do.
Yeah. So you don't really need a chequebook?
My son looks after my financial affairs, I think, better than I would.
Right. Do you get on without a chequebook? Do you use one a lot?
No, never use one.
Never use one?
Never use one.
So how do you pay your bills?
Internet banking.
Do you?
Or direct debit.
All the time?
Yep.
Yeah. So when would be the last time you wrote a cheque?
Oh, years ago.
Really? So
Yep.
you're one of the modern ones?
Yeah, might be.
Yeah.
Oh, I might have written one for my accountant the other week.
Yeah, well, you've got to do it for him, I suppose, don't you?
That's about it, yeah.
Do you use a chequebook a lot now?
Doing the business.
Yes. So
Yes.
how would you get on without one?
I guess you use more internet banking.
Do you do much of that?
Do some banking with the
Yeah.
internet, but the business stuff we usually use checks so you can trace it.
That's I would have thought it'd be easier to trace it, isn't it, really?
Yeah.
When you
Yeah.
go to your accountant, they want to have a look at the cheque butts, don't they?
That's right.
You've never had a cheque?
Never in my life.
Really? So how have you managed?
I've always dealt with cash.
Yes.
And if I've ever needed to post a cheque, if I've got a friend that just writes a cheque and...
Oh, so you can borrow someone else?
Yeah, but it's only happened probably 15 times in my life.
Do you use a chequebook?
No, I don't.
You don't use one?
I don't use one, no.
How do you pay the bills at all?
Online?
Do you?
Yep.
And can you trace that all right? You keep...
Yeah, you can. You go back through your accounts and check that, yeah.
And the accountant likes it?
Sometimes it's a hassle when there's places that don't take online stuff. That's the
Right,
only
so
thing.
how do you get around that?
I usually ask a friend to pay it by cheque and I give them the money.
Hardly ever.
Really? So how do you do your transactions?
Well, online.
Do you?
Yes,
And you
mostly
trust that?
Absolutely.
And you
yes.
keep a record?
Yes.
Better than a chequebook?
Well, you've got the statement online, so you can just check that as well, and it
Right.
goes back quite a long way.
Right.
So it's fine.
You're not going to miss one?
Not at all.
Do you use a chequebook?
Really? Occasionally, though.
Right. And yourself, sir?
Once a month.
Yeah.
One cheque a month.
Is that right?
Yeah, that's all.
And you could get round that if you had to?
Oh, yeah.
How would you do that?
On the internet.
Do you use online banking?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's very clever. I don't. And I think you're very clever to be able to do that.
Not really.
Right.
No, you don't have
Do
to
it
be
on
that
your
clever.
phone, too.
And you can keep a record pretty easily.
Yeah, oh yeah.
So it's no hassle?
No, you can print out receipts and everything, so it's fine. Yeah.
So if the chequebook goes, you're not worried?
No.
Not particularly. Occasionally you need a cheque for something. You don't have an account set up on the internet or something.
Yeah, it
They don't
depends
have
who
the-
you're dealing with. Some
Smaller places.
Yeah.
Do you use a chequebook?
No, haven't done for a long time actually.
So you're not even going to miss it?
No, I wouldn't.
So you do everything online?
Yep,
Yeah.
online or, EFTPOS, whatever, yeah.
And you trust online?
Yeah, I do now.
Yeah.
Wouldn't have done a few years ago, but yeah.
Yeah, right. And you managed to keep your records all right?
Yep.
You don't have a
fine.
hassle? Or
No.
Do you just take them off the statement, or what do you do?
Yeah, I don't get... I just use the computer, online, everything, yeah.
So you're not going to miss a dear old checkbook?
No.
Oh,
I wouldn't. I haven't had one for years.
Probably not. Most of mine is done online.
Really?
Yeah.
So
occasionally I have to send something by cheque, but I'd say 95% of the time it's online.
And you trust that, and you're comfortable with it?
Yeah, perfectly comfortable with that.
And your records are still okay and everything? You managed to keep your records okay? Have you got one?
Yes, we have.
Ah, do you use it?
Yes, we do.
So how would he get on if there aren't checkbooks available?
Good question. We would get by, but we do use it sometimes in rare instances.
Do you do online banking?
Yes, we do.
Yeah, so you could do more of that, perhaps?
Perhaps.
Yeah. Would you miss the checkbook?
As I say, we use it in rare instances. Sometimes it's a good full stop, backstop, if we don't have an internet connection, for example.
Right. Well, there we go. I've learnt my lesson today. I'm probably going to have to get in the modern world. Most people are not going to miss a checkbook at all. What really did stagger me with the street talk today was the number of people who don't even have a checkbook. Don't need it, won't miss it. So perhaps we've all got to get into the computer age, we've all got to go online. But staggering, isn't it? The dear old checkbook won't get missed.
And that's CTV News. I'm Emily Cooper.
Supporting local content so you can see more of New Zealand on air.